Patrik Laine was traded by the Columbus Blue Jackets to the Montreal Canadiens earlier this week, and this deal has some implications for our Boston Bruins that I will break down on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, August 21st, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. It's free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, on Monday, a very big trade went down in the NHL as Patrik Laine was sent by the Columbus Blue Jackets to the Montreal Canadiens for a 2026 second-round pick and Jordan Harris. Now, let me rephrase that. Montreal got the 2026 second-round pick along with Laine in exchange for defenseman Jordan Harris. The Blue Jackets shed quite a bit of cap space here. They bring in a young defenseman, and the Canadiens bolstered their roster with a second overall pick not that long ago who has quite the scoring pop. Now, yes, Laine has had his ups and downs both on and off the ice, but he's still a very talented forward who has scored 30 goals multiple times in this league and reached a career high 44 back in 2017-18 as a member of the Winnipeg Jets. He maxed out at 26 goals in Columbus, although he did have a pretty good 2021-22, 26 goals, 30 assists for 56 points. Now, we'll talk about the impact he could have on the Canadiens roster and their chances later on. But one way that this actively impacts the Boston Bruins is that prior to acquiring Patrik Laine, Montreal was one of only a few teams capable of placing an offer sheet on Bruins restricted free agent goalie Jeremy Swayman. The Habs no longer can afford to do so. I talked about this on the podcast last week. Everything you need to know about his Swayman offer sheet, and the Canadiens were pretty much the one team that had both the cap space, the resources, and a need in net for a guy like Jeremy Swayman. But it's not going to happen because the Canadiens added Patrik Laine, taking on all of his cap hit, and the Canadiens now are a bit over the salary cap and have taken themselves out of any Swayman possibility. Now, it probably wasn't going to happen. Offer sheets are incredibly rare. I think there's been 3 that have been successful in the last 16 years, 2 of which just took place this week with Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg signing offer sheets with the St. Louis Blues that the Edmonton Oilers did not match. The other one, of course, being Jesperi Kotkaniemi signing with the Carolina Hurricanes after the Habs had tried the year before to sign Sebastian Aho. So the Canadiens out of the running. There are a few teams that could conceivably pull this off. One of them was the Seattle Kraken. They're out of the running after signing Matty Beniers to a nice 7-year, $50 million contract yesterday. The Detroit Red Wings have a lot of space, but they have 3 goalies on the roster, and they have to sign Mo Seider and Lucas Raymond. The Buffalo Sabres, New York Islanders, Nashville Predators, Utah have decent situations in net heading into the upcoming season. Well, great situations in the case of the Islanders and the Predators. Sabres, Utah, they're doing all right. And, the one team that now has the assets is Columbus, but it would not really make sense for them to sign Jeremy Swayman to an offer sheet, seeing as they are pretty far off in terms of Stanley Cup contention. Even if you add Swayman to the mix, who knows if they'd even be a playoff team. They have a lot of good young pieces that are coming up. They signed Sean Monahan to see if he can reignite his chemistry with Johnny Gaudreau, maybe get that guy going. Adam Fantilli, of course, Kirill Marchenko. They do have a lot of good young guys, but it wouldn't really make sense for them to do this. Now, Columbus, if they wanted to do like an offer sheet north of 10.7, which the Bruins would pretty much not be able to match, they would have to give up their next 4 first-round picks. Not really much sense in doing that for the Columbus Blue Jackets, seeing as they could really use those picks in their ongoing rebuilding process. Jeremy Swayman has said recently that he believes something is going to get done. He has full confidence in his agent to get something done. The one situation where I was thinking it was possible was Montreal, because they were a pretty good offensive team prior to Laine's arrival. They had some good young pieces to build around on the blue line as well. Sam Bontempo, Caden Primo, and net. You could see a situation where they try to add a goalie to really, you don't even have to be that great of an offensive team as we saw last year with a guy like Swayman and net. He can really bail you out and keep you in games. So he's a guy that could be a real difference maker for a team. The longer it drags out, there's still a possibility of an offer sheet. But with Patrik Laine going to Montreal, you can at least take the Montreal Canadiens off that list of potential offer sheeters. And the likelihood of it happening really is not great anyways. Now, there are some other impacts on the Bruins as a result of this trade, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. We're driven by the search for better, and when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for candidates isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. So ditch the busy work. You can use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging, and you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. All right, so we talked about how the Montreal Canadiens effectively took themselves out of consideration when it comes to signing Jeremy Swayman to an offer sheet. There are some teams potentially that could pull it off. It's pretty unlikely. And the Bruins are going to need Jeremy Swayman because with Laine coming to the Canadiens, the Atlantic Division got a little bit tougher here. Let's not kid ourselves. Patrik Laine, yes, he was in the player assistance program. He hasn't really hit the levels that he did in his earlier seasons where he came out of the gate flying. Remember, there was a time when there was some debate in regards to Austin Matthews versus Patrik Laine at the top of that draft. The Canadiens now have a pretty good looking forward group, and they could be a bit more of a handful here for Atlantic Division opponents. Now, they're not, let's be honest, they're a borderline playoff team still, but in the Atlantic Division features some of the best players in the NHL. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander on the Leafs. You got Nikita Kucherov on the Lightning. You have Matthew Tkachuk, the Florida Panthers, Alexander Barkov. The Canadiens did themselves a big favor by bringing in a star player like Laine. And while they're still technically rebuilding, they did a really good job of bringing in that star player along with a second-round pick just for a guy like Jordan Harris, a defenseman who's young, promising, but they got a lot of young, promising players. This could make the Canadiens much more competitive in the near future. This is a team that already has Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki, Juraj Slafkovsky on the top line. That was a dominant unit at times last season. Lane Hudson, Arbor, Jeha on the back end with some other guys coming up as well. You have Kirby Dach, Alex Newhook, who are highly touted, former first-round picks. This is a team that could make a bit more noise here in this coming season. And I remarked on X the other day that, it's kind of annoying to have the Canadiens being run so well these days. They have a very good front office in Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton. Gorton, of course, is a guy that we're familiar here. In his time with the Bruins, he made a very big impact, and they've done a really good job of rebuilding this Montreal Canadiens team. If you look at their top six at the moment, Slafkovsky, Suzuki, Caulfield, Newhook, Dach, Laine, there is a boatload of talent there in that top six. I mean, that is the envy of a lot of other teams' top six players. The back end, they've got Matheson, Gooley, Hudson, Savard, Jeha, Barron, with some other guys waiting in the wings to come and make an impact. So this could be a pretty decent team. Not too far away, and adding Laine to the top six just does this team a pretty good service. It gives them an even bigger fighting chance night in and night out. Here's what Sportsnet had to write about Laine going to the Canadiens. They wrote, quote, "Healthy and at his best, Laine is still a dangerous scorer. In 2021-22 to 2022-23, he scored 48 goals in 111 games for Columbus and had a 1.37 goals per 60 minutes of ice time rate that was comparable to Kyle Connor, Elias Pettersson, and Alexander Barkov. In his first 3 seasons with Columbus, Laine scored at 0.38 goals per game pace, good for 43rd in the league. So given where his career began in Winnipeg, those recent numbers contributed to questions about Laine's ability to still produce at an elite consistent level, but he was still producing. There were other circumstances, of course, injuries, limited him and a broken clavicle in 2023. Setback later on led Laine to getting shoulder surgery. He also spent time in the player assistance program to help get through some of the mental struggles that were being brought on. But from 2016 to 2020, his first 4 years in the NHL in Winnipeg, Laine was a top 10 goal scorer in the league with 138 goals in 305 games, tied with Patrik Laine and John Tavares for 7th overall. With 2 years remaining on a contract that comes in at $8.7 million, the Canadiens had the flexibility to take on the full value, add an extra second-round pick in 2025, and see if Laine can get back to the player he once was. If it works, it could help launch the team to its next stage. End quote. So look at what it's such a low risk, potentially high reward move that, you're getting an elite shooter. He's one of the few NHL snipers that can beat goalies clean from all angles, and his effort on and off the puck, can range a bit, but still, when he gets the puck, his ability to get it on net and to score goals is, I wouldn't say unmatched, but it is very, very high end. High end offensive talent needs to be only average defensively to give them that elite moniker. And Laine is still just 26 years old, and Montreal's coaching staff should be able to get pretty good performance out of him. So the Canadiens, they're well run. They've done a lot of good in terms of building this team, getting value, seeking, getting Newhook, bringing in Kirby Dach, guys who were highly touted, and their drafting teams were willing to part ways with them. That second line could be a difference maker for this team. And while they might not crack the top 4 in the Atlantic Division, they could be a lot better than people think this season and will give teams like the Bruins some problems and a run for their money. So what does that mean for Boston? Well, scoring is going to be a premium for this team. They need to add still, and we'll discuss some options here as the podcast continues. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel over the last several months, and for good reason. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Got something a little different for you today. We'd like to announce that now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So all you have to do, go to fanduel.com/lockedon, download America's #1 sportsbook, put down a $5 bet on anything, the next Red Sox game, Patriots, whatever, and then you'll get this 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon, download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So while the Canadiens have loaded up by adding an elite level sniper in Patrik Laine, we know that the Bruins have some offensive holes to fill. We would, in an ideal world, a guy like Fabian Lysell becomes a Laine type sniper who, offensively gifted, all world, but maybe with some defensive deficiencies, which is fine. Not everybody has to be a Selke Trophy candidate. So Lysell stepping in, training camp, earning a second line spot, and comes out gunning. That would be fantastic. But the reality is, with Boston losing Jake DeBrusk, Danton Heinen, question mark as to whether James Van Riemsdyk could possibly re-sign after the Jeremy Swayman contract is settled. Who knows where he could land, but that's 3 pretty good forwards that the Bruins have lost. Yes, they brought in Elias Lindholm. They brought in Max Jones, Riley Tufte. They're expecting more from a healthy Matt Patra, maybe more from Trent Frederick and Morgan Geekie, but there's still room to add here for this club. Even with those three forwards that I mentioned in the lineup last year and career years from Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, with David Pastrnak rolling at an elite level, this team ranked 13th in goals per game at 3.21. That's an average of 3.21 that they scored. Total goals last year, 263. Again, tied for 13th with the Vegas Golden Knights. So along those lines, I've talked a lot about potential PTOs or signing guys to value level deals. We talked about Filip Zadina. I've mentioned Blake Wheeler last week, potentially Tyler Johnson. Well, there was an official report the other day of a couple guys that the Bruins could be looking at, and it came from Sean Hutchin, and he reported that the Bruins are considering inviting Blake Wheeler and Kailer Yamamoto to training camp, which Yamamoto is another guy that I've discussed here on the podcast as well. So again, this comes from Sean Hutchin of, I believe, the Fourth Period. And he said the other day that a source close to the situation has told him the Bruins are considering extending PTOs to Blake Wheeler and Kailer Yamamoto. Wheeler broke that down the other day, a familiar face. Yamamoto is a guy who was selected in the first round not too long ago in 2017. He's coming off a bit of a tough season with the Seattle Kraken. He was going home. A lot expected of him as a Spokane, Washington native. He had the potential to bounce back in familiar surroundings, but he only had 8 goals and 16 points in 59 games. He did have solid previous years in Edmonton, 10 goals, 25 points in 58 games in 2022-23. And he also set career highs with 20 goals, 21 assists, and 41 points the previous season. His best stretch came in 2019-20 when he had 11 goals, 26 points in 27 games. That was playing alongside Leon Draisaitl, I believed. With the Bruins losing Heinen, DeBrusk, they could use another skilled winger. And it wouldn't hurt to have an experienced player like a Yamamoto, like a Wheeler at training camp on a PTO, again, to push the younger guys to excel and grab spots like Lysell or maybe Georgi Merkulov, or to bring that experience in and to help these guys to see that nothing is guaranteed here at the NHL level. If Yamamoto impressed on a PTO, sign him to a 1-year deal, show me deal, and perhaps help him get his career back on track and help the Bruins offense be boosted as well. Filip Zadina would be a great addition as well, I think, as a Czech coming in. Zacha, Pastrnak in the mix. So it is PTO season. We've seen one. Jacob Vrana was signed. We've had Tanner Pearson going to Vegas on a PTO. These are going to start to trickle in. And when they do, I'll be sure to report on them here on Locked On Boston Bruins, because we bring you all the latest on the black and gold. So that's my take on what the Laine trade means for the Boston Bruins. The Canadiens, pretty well run, taking a flyer on Laine that could really pay off. Swayman offer sheet off the table, but the Bruins still need to boost their scoring to keep up in this arms race, and anything they can do PTO-wise, they should explore. All right, that's it for today's episode, my friends. I hope you're all having a great week. Please do take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you here again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.